Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to the 36th Right and Left Discussion Forum. The purpose of our discussion forum is to demonstrate that civil discussion is an enlightening experience to all who participate. We learn from respectfully listening to each other with an open mind and a thirst for knowledge. Today, our panel is going to discuss the pros and cons of legalized gambling. Our panel today, beginning on my left, is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. And on his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and current member of the Wadsworth City Council. Ron, I know you've been thinking about this an awful lot, but let me ask you this. In the early days of our country, there were few, if any, legal restrictions to gambling. By the mid-19th century, as gambling was being blamed for problems of crime, destruction of families, poor education, and other social issues, the states began to outlaw the practice. And finally, by 1910, there was virtually no legal gambling in the United States. In recent years, we've seen legalized gambling make a comeback in many places in the country. Do you think we're headed in the right direction?
John, there are three answers to that question. Yes, no, and it doesn't matter. And I've been thinking about it. It kind of, when you look at the history of it, I think what is an important issue here is what you think about the morality of gambling. As you commented, by 1910, because of family problems and so forth, they had been outlawed. By the time of, shortly after the Depression, it began to become more acceptable and governments got into it, mainly because organized crime got into it in a big way. So the government figured, we need to regulate this. We need to get some control over this. So when you look at the enormous amounts of money that are generated here, enormous. Article in the paper yesterday had how that the racinos locally are upset because their revenue is off 0.5% or something like that from month to month. Well, people get involved with that. People want to do this. The government is regulating. The government sees it as a source of money. From a commercial standpoint, whether it's the companies that own the casinos or the governments that run the lotteries, it's an enormous incentive, enormously practicable. For the individual, not so much. I'm too much of a scientist and mathematician to get very excited about the horrible odds involved with buying a lottery ticket. Why pay my taxes in that way? I'll just save my money, my disposable income for something else, like woodworking or photography. So there is that. There is the thing. There is also the rise as people become more involved with this. The rise of gambling addictions. I do know at least one person who confesses to me that he has a gambling addiction. Before his retirement, he was a long-distance trucker. He would stop off at the casinos, and in several places in the country, he has asked the casinos to put him on the no admittance list. He's realized that he has a problem, and he's attempting to combat it. So that is an issue. Should the government regulate this in order to help these people in some way? Yeah, as a liberal, I say the government needs to be involved. The government needs to be involved in ways of regulation and trying to quell a little bit of organized crime. The government, I think, realizes that prohibition of gambling is impossible. Just as prohibition of alcohol was impossible, and gave rise to organized crime in the 20s. So yes, no, maybe it doesn't matter.
How about you, Bryan?
Well, I came at it from a little different angle. I agree with everything that Ron has said. I think the moral costs. I don't think gambling is the answer to anyone's problems. I found a little article online. An individual professor at Baylor has done some studies. He's not backed by the anti-gambling folks, or he's not supported by the gambling folks, and he comes to the conclusion that gambling is actually a net loss to our economy by $3 to 1. So for every dollar that gambling might provide to our economy, it actually takes $3 to support that in social programs. He dealt specifically with the individuals that have these problems. Ron mentioned his friend. I would say he's probably a problem gambler. There are pathological gamblers. And he estimates that their cost to society is on the average of $12,000 a year. When he looks at just a variety of things, work-related issues, family-related issues, social services costs, crime, which includes fraud, embezzlement, burglary to support their habits. He cites a study that was done that says that the pathological gambler is 50% of the revenue of the casino.
Really?
And that he cites another study done by, the largest money makers for the casinos are the slot machines, and they're easily addictive. He said usually people that play slot machines are addicted within the first year if they have this particular behavior.
It's sort of like the crack of gambling.
Exactly, exactly. You could say that. Yeah, exactly. It's the crack of gambling, and most casinos, those are predictable dollars. It's not the Hollywood poker game. It's not the other games of chance. It's the floors that are filled with slot machines and keno machines that actually make the dollars.
Yeah.
A personal, anecdote. In 1976, the state of New Jersey passed a law to bring in legalized gambling. I think it was one of the first states that
for Atlantic City.
For Atlantic City, Class 3 gambling.
Outside of that.
It was to be the answer to all their problems. It was going to generate so much revenue for the schools. It was going to generate so much revenue for the state, and it has failed to do so. It has made a lot of money for the people that run the casinos, as far as the corporations, because it's legal. You've got a variety of gaming companies, Bally's, Harrah's, you name them. Trump. They've all moved from the west to the east coast, and the numbers just don't support it. And I think that when you look at it that way, and you say to yourself, if you're a community, he had some very stark studies that were done that a community of 100,000 people, when they're looking at bringing gambling, it only breaks even after over 13,000 people are employed. So, from an economic standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. And we're not even getting into some of the soft dollars that it affects. The families that are affected by it, the social issues that come up. These are just things that are easily quantified through statistics. So along those lines, I just can't support.
There's a statistical outlier on that. I was living in Connecticut at the time that Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun went in for the Indian communities, and those have been enormously successful for those communities.
Right.
In fact, it left people scrambling to try to prove that they had some Indian ancestry, so they could get in on that. So they have an amazing situation there, and it's been very profitable. Hasn't done the state very much, but
Patty, as a member of Wadsworth City Council, do you see it as a possible revenue stream for the city if we were to have a casino here in town?
Well, I guess we could look at Cleveland and see what it's done for them. I don't know that Wadsworth could support a full casino. There's a lot of gambling, though, that's not casino related. I mean, if you go to a Wadsworth football game and purchase a 50-50 ticket, you're gambling. Now, a lot of times when they do donation, they'll say it's a donation.
Now, wait a second, Patty. I have to disagree.
That's you're placing money. You're
right.
betting that you're going to win. How many churches have and nonprofit organizations have raffles for whatever reason? That is a form of gambling. I know St. Vincent's has a bingo night, which basically built their entire school from it. Walsh High School has has 2 nights, and it's amazing. When my son went to Walsh, one of the requirements for parents was to sign up to work at bingo night, and you'd be amazed how many people do that. I don't have a problem with that. I guess, I could go to a movie. And, if you have a family of 4, you could go out and you'll probably spend about $75 easily, by the time you get your tickets and buy a box of popcorn for what, $10 or something like this. For many people, going to a casino or whatever is their entertainment. And we're not talking the problem gambler. I have friends who their big entertainment is going out and playing bingo. I have friends that love to go to the casinos. Now what they do is they go in and say, I have a limit. And if they lose $75, $100, they figure, well, that's my entertainment for the night. And if I had gone to a show or whatever, if you look at Las Vegas even, Las Vegas has, and this has been for quite a few years now, they've turned to the family type program. The casinos are set up where you can bring mom, dad, and the kids can be off doing this. Mom and dad can go to the shows, mom and dad can gamble some, and they make a great deal of money out of it. I agree, there are problems with people that are addicted to it, and this is a big deal. And it was involved heavily with organized crime, particularly in the 50s when Las Vegas first opened. With federal regulation, that has been quelled a bit. However, as Ron stated with alcohol, there are some things that it's going to be impossible to eliminate completely. And not all things, people overuse drugs. And there's a great deal of cost in this country because of, and I'm not talking cocaine or heroin, I'm talking prescription drugs that are on the market. Should we ban prescription drugs because some people overuse them? I don't think we want to do that. Yeah. Are there other problems? Yeah, I mean, there is a concern about, I know when Atlantic City went into place, the crime rate rose significantly. Now they've made a lot of changes, I think, in New Jersey, so as to, that's kind of gone down. I have not read of any huge crime rate increase in Cleveland since the casino opened up. I haven't heard of crime rates soaring down in Wheeling, and they've had the dog races down there for years on the island, and they also have a big casino down there. I don't know that the crime rate is going up. I did have some concern, like in Ohio, of course, we have a lottery, which brings a great deal of money into the state, something like 30, I think I read at one point there were 37 states, but I think there's more now that have state lotteries. My original problem with the lottery is we first passed a law for that in the early 70s.
Yeah, to benefit
70,
the schools.
71, to benefit the schools. And of course what happened was the state took the money in and they said it was going to the schools, but what they did was what they had budgeted for schools
took it out.
Elsewhere took it out and just moved it over. So there was no additional money for the schools. So it was kind of sold on a false premise. To realistically think that you're going to eliminate gambling of any sort that's unrealistic.
Psychologically, isn't it really the entrepreneurial spirit? Because here's risk, here's dare, here's possibility of great reward. All I have to do is do this, and I can get a great reward from this.
Oh, I have a good friend
who risk, but
who
it's
retired
exciting.
And went to a casino like 2 days after she retired and won $4 million, $5 million.
Really?
Yeah, at a casino down in Wheeling.
Well, then we all ought to do that.
Yeah. That's I think the odds are ridiculous.
I think my point is that if a community is really looking at it, they need to look at the total costs of this.
Yeah.
And everybody loves to see the revenue side. Everybody loves to see those lights and everything. But it's somewhat trite. But the deck is stacked against you.
Sure.
When you come to this, and it's not one of those things where it's going to be the answer to a small community. Obviously, the Indian tribes have done a nice job of it because they don't have the federal government involved. Once they get their license, once they've established that they meet the criteria, these types of casinos are popping up all over the West.
Sure. That's been going on for quite some time.
And you're talking the casinos is the type you're against, not the raffles and the...
Right, the Class 3 type of gambling.
Right.
So yeah.
Whenever the issue comes up in a community or a state, there's always the argument, well, if we don't do it, then our citizens will just go over to another state and take the money out. And
it's part of the reason it went
so
in
forth.
Cleveland.
But we look at, Cleveland, the Horseshoe came out with their 2013 revenue number the other day. It was $329 million that they took in. And according to some studies, you have to assume that a lot of that 329 million was people spending money there that they did not spend in the grocery store. They did not spend it for clothing. They did not spend it on a new car. They spent it in the casino. And when you think about, I took just enough the economics courses in college to be irresponsible on the subject, but when I think about wealth creation, from an economic development point of view, the $329 million from the Horseshoe is not like a $329 million from a machine tool company in Cleveland. They're creating wealth. They're creating actual wealth. Gambling doesn't do that. You're right, it's entertainment. It just gets absorbed.
I don't particularly like to I've gone to Las Vegas once, and I went on a bus trip to actually one of the Indian casinos. I was never so bored in my entire life. I absolutely hated it. And the strange thing was, I was kind of by myself, and I had this, I'm very cheap, I understand, so I'm not going to lose my money. So I was up about $20, and I thought, I'm done, this is it. And I walk out, and of course there's busloads of people, and here, right by the entrance, and this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there are chairs with people just sitting there.